Hey, what is up, guys and gals? Welcome to Tausify. My name is Tausif, and just in case if anybody was wondering why I haven't been uploading recently, it's because we overthrew a fascist dictator government. For the past couple of weeks, we had an internet blackout. It all started with a protest in our country, which is Bangladesh. The students were protesting to reform the quota system of some of our civil service and public sector jobs, specifically the privileges given to the children and grandchildren of the freedom fighters. So the freedom fighters are the ones who fought in the liberation war of Bangladesh back in 1971. And at that time, when the quota was introduced, they would give these privileges to the freedom fighters. And so people were in agreement with this quota at the time because the freedom fighters fought for our country. They've lost their loved ones, and many of them got injured, and many of them lost their properties to sustain damage to their properties and livelihoods. So the majority of the people were fine with that, and it was a way of honoring the freedom fighters. But 50 years or so after the liberation of our country, now the privilege has extended to their children and their grandchildren. So as it stands today, we have 30% of the civil service and public sector jobs reserved for the freedom fighters' children and grandchildren, 10% to backward districts, 5% to ethnic minorities, 10% to women, and 1% to the physically challenged. And the remaining 44% are based on merit. So basically, us normal people, if a student from who is not related to freedom fighters was equally qualified and highly educated and talented, applied for a civil service job or a public sector job, that student would actually face a very low likelihood of getting the job because there are all these other privileged groups out there. And another problem is that even the children and grandchildren of the freedom fighters are not all getting these jobs because Sheikh Hasina, the prime minister of our country, she always puts her favorite people who she favors, the corrupt politicians and members of her political party, the Awami League, a lot of them get free access to these jobs. So even if you think about honoring the freedom fighters and their children and grandchildren, even they are not getting a lot of these jobs. So the students went to the streets protesting the quota system, especially the 30% freedom fighters quota. And what the government did instead is straight up attacking the student protesters, resulting in the deaths of many of the protesters and even people who were not protesting, including children as young as 5 and 6 who were playing in their balconies and in their rooftops. There were combatants, police officers, the army, and snipers on helicopters shooting at civilians. And on top of that, the government decided to do a total internet blackout. So there was no internet for a week. And then when the internet got restored, it was incredibly slow to the point that we couldn't basically do a lot of the things without the VPN. And even with the VPN, it was incredibly slow. It was done so that they could suppress the information and they could hide their atrocities. But they didn't stay hidden, and once people learned about all of these mass murdering, they decided to take to the streets. The population of the entire country mobilized, and they basically stormed the office of the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, the Ganabhavan, and Sheikh Hasina was finally forced to resign and leave the country. And that is basically how we overthrew a fascist dictator government. And only yesterday, Bangladesh have announced their interim prime minister, who is the Nobel laureate Dr. Muhammad Yunus, who won the 2006 Nobel Peace Prize for his pioneering microfinance work that helped alleviate poverty in Bangladesh. And that's what has been happening, and this is the reason why I personally couldn't create any content. So yeah, there was a lot of turmoil, a lot of violence, but at least now the people of Bangladesh are happy, and it is a new beginning for our country. So you guys give your best wishes to the people of Bangladesh, and with that being said, I'm going to be back with regular gaming content. So until then, be good and stay Tausified.